Hello YouTube, Harry here, hope you're doing well. It's hard to believe that Tim Miller's Love, Death and Robots came out 2 years ago, and now, as if by magic, a second season has finally appeared. Today I'm going to be analysing and reviewing these new stories in order to separate the wheat from the chaff. Compared to the 18 episodes we were treated to back then, the second season is relatively shorter with a mere 8. Going into this I was expecting more peaks and troughs in quality with a variety of animation styles from a myriad of different animation studios, and that's basically what I got. Spoilers from here on out. John Scalzi, known for penning 3 robots, When the Yogurt Took Over and Alternate Histories, returns with a collision of all 3 of those episodes in automated customer service. The episode focused primarily on a futuristic Roomba and its dog-loving master. The robot winds up malfunctioning and tries to kill her. I loved the over-the-top art style, specifically on the elderly characters with their bizarre proportions. Its focus on automation reminded me of the Disney Pixar film WALL-E. There was a direct reference to the film 2001: A Space Odyssey with the Stargate reflected in Granny's glasses. The machine made a rather daunting and subsequently hilarious impression when it tore a pillow in 2 and proceeded to clean it up. Unfortunately, there were 2 aspects to this episode that kinda spoiled it somewhat. The immature comedy displayed in the Alternate Histories episode is just as prevalent in this one. Jerking off. Poo. The narration in this episode equally rubbed me up the wrong way, manifested as an answering machine for the Roomba helpline. It was quite unnecessary and seemed to act as though malfunctioning was the machine's purpose to begin with, as well as her killing it.
Congratulations! You stopped the unstoppable killing machine that is VacuBot.
And then all the machines went after her anyway. This was when the narration was at its worst, because the images of all the robots going rogue presented the information in a more than adequate way.
All of whom will now hunt you ceaselessly. This is your life now, to hide and wander, never a moment's rest, in this barren wasteland that is now your existence.
So in summary, it was alright. The creators of Season 1's episode Zima Blue return with the episode simply titled Ice. This was probably the biggest disappointment of this year's season. I believe it stems from a lack of depth and philosophy that was originally brought to the table. Where that episode made me think and feel, this episode makes me think about... makes me feel... absolutely nothing. Once again, the unique art style produces some beautiful vistas, from machinery chomping away at the ice to the intergalactic whales breaking through said ice for air. Even this street full of addicts made a big impression on me. Unfortunately, this episode just has basically no story to it whatsoever. They introduce it by suggesting that our protagonist is the only 16-year-old on the planet that's not been modded. Modded meaning they can do cool backflips and shit. Seriously, that's all it is. For an unknown reason, his younger brother was modded, but he wasn't. In spite of this, all that's required of this group of people is the ability to run. The leader of this gang takes them out onto the ice where the most diabolical dialogue took place.
Frost whales, up! Fucking danger, okay?
Oh yeah, speaking of great dialogue, there's at least one line with the word fuck every minute in this episode, just to ensure that 18 rating, I guess. The gang also seemed to know everything about the whales.
They always hit 7 times.
Minimum 7.
Yet when they breached the ice, they all looked so stunned as though they've never seen one before. After all the smoking and running, there didn't seem to be much purpose to what they were doing. I know that wasting time is exactly what teenagers do, but by the end of the episode, it didn't even seem like the unmodded protagonist was any closer to fitting in than he was at the beginning. So what was the point of it all? Pop Squad definitely impressed me more than the first 2. I loved its opening with the savage murder of children because apparently breeding is illegal in this universe. The reason behind this was apparently overpopulation, even though not once in the episode was this made apparent with all the big empty scenes on the ground. The concept of a high immortal society living in the clouds like gods, however, was a marvel to behold. The quality of that singing performance felt like it genuinely had been perfected over 20 years, and the contrasting visuals were equally astonishing. I loved this transition of a gunshot into a fast-flying car, and the idea that a child murderer starts developing a conscience piqued my interest also. The problems, however, start to mount up once you start thinking about this story a bit more. For some reason, after killing those two kids, our protagonist took the box of toys and kept it in the back of his car instead of putting it into evidence. He also didn't wash his hands before coming to a high-class party. After getting her boost, his singing girlfriend didn't seem to care that the box of kids' toys was still in the back of his car. It would appear as though his brush with death was what caused him to have this sudden realization that his job is a dirty business. Had we seen some form of alteration or even indoctrination in our protagonist, I'd understand why he would have been okay with doing what he does for a living. The closest we got to this was when the guy offered a cigarette to a breastfeeding mother. The ending of the episode proves that both police officers are mortal. If the characters were aware of this the whole time, how could they have been okay with killing children from the beginning? If our protagonist was also immortal, like his girlfriend, it would make the premise more believable and his transformation more interesting. Snow in the desert was kind of cool, but nothing incredible. Its predecessor Beyond the Aquila Rift had a far more archetypal story with a truly frightening twist at the end. Snow can, however, boast of being the most realistic looking episode of the lot, but that doesn't necessarily make it the best one. It sets itself up with a cruel human colony on a desert planet where water thieves are put in cages to dehydrate. This aspect of the story unfortunately was never utilized again in the episode, as the focus shifted onto this character Snow, who is wanted for something or other. In spite of being wanted, he will sit unmasked in a bar where a bunch of bounty hunters try and capture him.
I said, I challenge you! Everyone here heard it! That puts me within my rights.
Ugh, more wonderfully cringy dialogue. As the episode progresses, Snow meets a girl who also wears a face mask. Unfortunately, the female character's role in the story seemed to be nothing more than a sex object for our protagonist and a reeler of exposition.
There's something unique about the gonadotropin releasing hormone your body produces. Your cells are regenerative and hence immortal.
Don't you have a date tent? You can share mine.
Like, this right here was the moment I knew they were gonna shag by the end of the episode. More bounty hunters then showed up to take out Snow, and all the tension from their appearance disappeared in seconds. Upon arriving, this group of 5 decided to split up to find one person, allowing Snow to pick them off one at a time. It took this lot long enough to catch up to him. Surely some planning or tactics were involved. How would they have found him from within his hidden rock home anyway, unless they knew he was in there? Clearly they didn't, otherwise they wouldn't have split up. I guess it was cool seeing the girl revealed to be a cyborg and basically save the day. They actually established this earlier on in the episode when the girl said she came from Earth and he knew that it was run by artificial intelligence for its own protection. This idea nicely formed the romantic tie between these two seemingly invincible outcasts, ending the episode on a strangely positive note. And then we have the tall grass episode. I honestly think this is a contender for the worst episode of Love, Death and Robots ever. For those that don't know, Netflix has already produced a horror movie surrounding the idea of human beings getting lost amongst tall grass. Not only was this film downright terrible, but to see Netflix produce basically the same concept again but in animation form is so lazy and unimaginative. No wonder then that this episode was written by the same guy who wrote The Dump. The guy finds more eyeless monsters that you grow accustomed to seeing in this show. They all look identical as well, which once again reinforces this idea that the episode was probably whipped up faster than a cheese omelette. We then had a Christmas episode. In the middle of May. Whatever. This one was nice and simple, and I'd be convinced if somebody told me that they made this episode with stop-still animation or something. The animation style kinda reminds me of Coraline or The Nightmare Before Christmas. It is honestly just the weirdest shit that somebody thought, hey, let's make Santa a terrifying alien monster who chokes up presents. If anything, I think extending the length might have been to this episode's benefit. Say the kids open their presents and their parents' limbs are in there or something, I don't know. Ironically enough, this episode has nothing to do with love, death, or robots, and I thought it was pretty great. The semi-final episode, Life Hutch, is another absolute dud episode.
I'm gonna die here.
Alright, spoilers much. I just wondered why the invading humans had this shelter hub box thing so conveniently and closely placed to where this pilot had landed. It reminded me of that episode with Samira Wiley in season 1 that was just as forgettable as this one. I think it's partially because we already had the
Caution. Rogue robots.
Warning. Maintenance robot malfunction.
idea from the first episode of this season. The story kept flashing back to him being shot down in the first place, even though that conflict had nothing to do with this robot that was attacking him. Admittedly, this method of narrative delivery would be interesting to see again in a future episode, and I liked that there wasn't any narration with barely any dialogue in any of it. I think that his victory over the robot didn't feel very deserved by the end though, and I genuinely didn't feel a drop of care throughout the whole episode. Finally, the most meme-worthy episode, a giant Dennis from It's Always Sunny shows up on a beach somewhere. I genuinely laughed at the sight of it at first, and I thought this would be the turning point where finally some absolute insanity took place. For God's sake, it's based on a J.G. Ballard short story with Tim Miller adapting and directing. Unfortunately, the absolute insanity stopped after the first reveal, and my intrigue slumped beyond there. I wanted to see people crawling up his nose or some news reporters show up. People from around the world coming to see the giants. Come one, come all! Just some perspective from somebody. Anybody that wasn't this utterly boring twat. I genuinely couldn't tell if his pretentious narration was meant to be funny or not. He obviously didn't care enough to stop any of the ridiculous things that were happening, and by the end I was just cackling with laughter at all the strange stuff that we just saw around the town. There just seemed to be a strange contradiction between the musings of this observer and the hilarious sights that came from this giant's rotting corpse. So, did it suck? More or less, yeah. This show still has so much potential to be great, and I believe that the focus on stunning visuals can in fact cloud the need for a good story. You could be watching worse things on Netflix, but this season has been a bit of a letdown for me. Maybe my expectations were too high, maybe they should give Philip Gellert a break from adapting most of the screenplays. Comment below your ratings for each of the episodes in the comments below, and if you like, you can come and join us for a discussion on my Discord server. If you want early access to the creation of videos like this one, please consider making a pledge on my Patreon page. Thanks for watching, see you next time. Going into this, I was expecting more peaks and troughs in quality, with a variety of animation styles from a myriad of different animation styles. What? Animation studios. Oh dear. Roomba bloomer. Love me a bloomer. I just wondered why the invading humans had this shelter hub box thing so conveniently and closely placed to where this